There's an important thing in finance that you should be aware of, and that's how to translate the value of money from today into the future, and vice versa. So that sounds like a complex idea, but it's really pretty straightforward. It's like this. Which of these would you rather have? Would you rather have $1 today, or would you rather have $1 5 years later? If you thought about it, you might select this one. And the reason is that if I had $1 today, yeah, I could go and spend it. But remember, we're thinking about personal finances. So we're thinking about long-term financial security here. If I had $1 today, I could invest it. And in fact, let me show you this formula here. If I invested $1 at 5% a year for 5 years, then what I would end up with is something that's more than $1. In fact, it's $1 and about 28 cents. So if you asked me if I could have $1 today, or if I could have $1 5 years later, my answer would be give it to me today. Because if I know that I can make an interest rate of 5% a year every year for the next 5 years, I'll be better off taking the money today than just waiting and receiving it sometime later. This concept is called the time value of money. Money has value that's a function of time. We call this amount today, that $1 today, the present value. Presently, it's worth $1. Conversely, this $1.28 5 years later, that's called the future value, because it's some amount that ends up sometime in the future. So, when it comes to the time value of money, we have the present value, future value, and these two are connected by an interest rate, which we sometimes call a discount rate, and an investment period, which is basically the time between present and future value. We can link all these together with a formula. And this is a formula with real application. If you invest, for example, for 5 years, how much money are you going to have at the end of 5 years? If you put away $100 a month for retirement every month, and you keep doing that for 20 years and invest at 5% at a year, will you have enough money for retirement? You can answer these types of questions by using this formula. The present value is equal to the future value. That is, money today is equal to money tomorrow. Only that the money tomorrow has to be discounted or shrunken to account for this investment rate or interest rate, as well as time. Sometimes it's easier to take this bottom part of this formula here and move it to the other side, like so. And if we tidy things up a bit here, by taking present value and moving it here, then we may get something that seems somewhat familiar to what you've just seen. That is, if we go back to that last slide, if we have $1 today, presently, and we have an investment rate of, say, 5%, and if there's 5 years that we're investing this at 5%, then in the future, after 5 years, we'll end up with $1.28. That is what we're trying to show here. Changing the numbers around just for illustration a little bit. If I had $1,000 today, and rather than spending the money, I invested it in the stock market. Let's say I bought an ETF, which we'll discuss in a few subsequent chapters. I spent $1,000. And the stock market over the long run tends to deliver about an 8% return each year. So if I invested $1,000 this year, then I can expect that I'd have about $80 more by the end of the first year, 8% per year. Now, if I just parked this money, $1,000, for the next 20 years and said, goodbye, I just forgot about it, I just let it sit there and grow at 8% for the next 20 years, and then I woke up sometime later, 20 years, and I wanted to know how much was in that account. The future value, in other words. I could use this formula to find out that after 20 years, I'd end up with $4,660, nearly 4 times the amount of money that I originally had when I put this away. Now that's pretty cool, because if I see this as the amount of money that I've got in 20 years, and let's just say I kept it parked in the stock market, but instead of taking that money and letting it grow, I took 8% of it out each year and spent it. 8% of that amount is $372, meaning that after 20 years, every year after 20 years, every year for the rest of my life, as a result of having saved this money, this $1,000 up front, after 20 years, I'd have $372 every year to spend, and I'd never have to worry about that. If we divide that by 12, that's about $31 a month. The reason why I like this example personally is because if I think about saving $1,000 today, this becomes much more meaningful. If I park that in the stock market for the next 20 years, then I know when I'm older, that $1,000 today will turn into this sort of repeating gift of about $30 every month for the rest of my life. If you think about how much you spend on groceries, I don't know, let's say it's about $300 a month, then I'd need to do this process about 10 times before I had $310 a month. In other words, if I saved $1,000 a month for the next 10 months, perhaps this is after I get my first full-time job, for example, then if I let that sit for 20 years in savings, invested in the stock market, then 20 years later, if I want, I will have basically paid for groceries for every month for the rest of my life. This type of financial security is one of the things we're getting at in this course. If we think about the long-run impacts of our savings, we can develop a plan to experience financial freedom.